Welcome to Basics of Hunting, where we cut through the BS of modern, gimmicky hunting tactics and get back to the tried and true basics that help us be successful in the woods.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. Today, I am joined by Christoby Babcock. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. Name changes every podcast, so be Christy.
Hey,
Kristen,
we've
Chris.
all been called worse, okay?
Well, in New Mexico, the guys called me Chris, and I was like, I'll let it happen.
I don't like it, but it's weird.
I fought this my whole life, but I don't want to get beat up, so Chris is good. That's fine.
What do you have going on? Like, it's October 15th. We got a cold front moving through Oklahoma. How are you feeling?
I'm like a race NASCAR driver sitting on go. I'm in like the 40th position, and I just know that I can still take first. So that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
We got the 30s in October coming up the next couple of days. So to be anything
we
but
plan on doing a
smiles
lot
would
of
be bad. Yeah. You're excited for it too, though.
Oh, for sure. But I guess just to get to the point today, today we're going to be doing a version of the podcast called Basics of Hunting. And you want to give a little rundown on that real quick?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of different versions of the show that you guys have probably seen. Sometimes we have on guests and we do interviews. Sometimes we do just long form water cooler talk, which is probably our bread and butter. We do live Q&A, and then we're introducing another series to the podcast or version of the podcast called The Basics of Hunting. We made a YouTube video about it. We feel compelled to talk about this, and I'm going to let's kick it back over to you to talk about kind of the goal of what this series is going to be.
Right. And if anyone's listened long enough, they've probably heard the analogy, or is it an analogy? Whatever it is, we're going to call it an analogy. KISS, keep it simple. And in an era of flashy, overcomplicated hunting strategies, it feels like a lot of people can get wrapped up into those tactics that can really only be used about 1% of the time, instead of, and also even in parts of the country, like those flashy tactics that, won't work in your area, but it does in theirs. And so you have to take with a grain of salt. But something that does work in all areas that we feel is just like throwing it back to the basics. Like no matter what, you do the basics right in basketball, football, any type of team sport or anything like that, more than likely you're going to be better than the people who can just like do a quick crossover. It's like great, but you can't play defense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with that, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to do a little version, short, sweet, to the point, and basically the only talk about the need to know points. That way it's like get in, get out.
So there'll be a different topic. We're not going to do these every single week. We'll probably do a couple of them a month, but it'll be, like Jake said, quick, to the point. We'll talk about a singular thing. It'll probably be less than 35 minutes, probably try to stick around the 30-minute realm. And we can talk about anything from topography to map scouting to boots on the ground, rubs, scrapes, trail camera strategy. We can talk about stuff, but the goal of all of it is talk about it in simplicity. So today we're talking about the basics of rubs.
Oh yeah. Hey, that's pretty good. That's pretty good for mid-October, wouldn't you say? Like, it's a pretty good topic.
I think this is timely. I think the basics of rubs is very, very timely right now. And people probably associate rubs with a lot of different things. Probably most commonly is the shedding of velvet. And bucks do rub a lot while shedding velvet, but it's not something that necessarily dies off once the velvet is gone. So apart from shedding velvet, one of the reasons that rubs exist is just similar to a scrape, is a way to mark territory and leave scent behind to let other bucks, let other does in the area know that this guy is here and he wants you to know about it. So in the simplest form, that's what a rub is. And if you had to describe it on a tree, Jake, what is a rub most likely going to look like?
It depends. Depends on the tree. Like, I've seen rubs on some, like, that's not shrub oak, but it's some sort of like shrubby stuff where it's just all broken. And I usually see that like during the rut, but for the most part, you just see, on a little low, I'm not good with diameters and stuff like that, but like maybe if you cup your hands in a circle, right? Like that's about the general I see it on, but it's just where the bark is missing from the tree. Usually one side or the other. Most of the time it's like a 360 around it, but it's just where they hit their antlers on it and they shed it up. Put it in simple terms.
And you see it on a bunch of different kinds of trees. You see it on big and on small. And for the most part, you're going to start to see that in probably mid-September on. And right now in mid-October, I think it's something you're going to start to see a lot more. And where we hunt a lot, you see what we would call, and I think Richie and Justin and all those guys would call rub lines. And so what do you think of rub lines?
Harder to find. Like, it's easy to go out and kind of be like, okay, look, there's a rub, cool. And then what I have problems with is just be like, okay, is this a rub that he was just pissed off one time and he just made, and now it's just like not, it's basically a non-existing rub where it's not a critical rub, I should say. Where it's
in
like,
isolation.
okay, yeah, I need to like hunt this particular spot because of this rub, right? And where rub lines come in is like, okay, if you can look down this trail or path or whatever it is, this side of the ridge, and you can see one rub, and then like maybe another 25, 50 yards, something like that, you see another, and then another, and you can kind of like, it's all going down this one trail. That's what we try to look for that makes us think, oh, hey, look, this is probably an area that a buck is frequently using pretty often.
And like rub lines are cool because they're kind of like connecting the dots. You're like, there's one. And then you like look a little above ahead of that and you're like, there's another one. And there's another one. I think I don't take a whole lot of things away from a rub in isolation. So like if I'm just walking and I see one rub, I'm like, okay, neat. You know, if I walk another 50 yards and there's another one, I'm like, okay. The more that I get in a more condensed area, the more it starts to alarm bells start going off.
So
in my head.
what is a condensed area? Like, explain that. Like, when is too big and when is too small? Or
if I found 3 or 4 or 5 or plus rubs in 100 and 150 yards, walking space, I would consider that pretty condensed. A lot of times you'll see them one tree, walk a couple steps, another tree, walk a couple steps. To me, that means there's either one buck in here that's pretty fired up and laying down a lot of sign, or there's a plethora. There can be more than one or several bucks in there. And I think of a spot like the community center where there is a community scrape in there, and there's rubs in every direction. And that, to me, there's multiple bucks in here laying down rubs. So that's what I think about it.
What about the freshness of the rubs? Because something interesting happened whenever we were in New Mexico, right? Like I used to think if I seen a rub and it still had like sap on it that was kind of like a little dried up, but it looked fresh, I would think that, oh man, that rub just got made. Like probably either last night or this morning, something hit that, and like that's why the sap's on it. But when we're in New Mexico, there's a guy telling us that that's really not the case, at least for elk.
Well, yeah, he was saying that when the sap drips down, that signifies that the rub's older, right? Because it's had time for the sap to drip down, and when
kind of ooze out.
Yeah. When you think about it, that does make a lot of sense. So I don't put a lot of weight into the recency of the rub, and as long as I can tell it's not from previous years, right? Like if I was known that was made in the fall, which, going back to the point previously, one in isolation doesn't mean a bunch. So if I see a bunch in one little area, I take stock in it, but I don't really think too much. I don't read too much into the freshness of it. Like I do like when I see one and I'm like, oh, look at those little bitty finger shreds off it. That to me is like fresh.
Yeah. Well, something I try to look for and is talking about the freshness is like, the sap is kind of cool. Like if it's oozing out or whether it's not, like that's cool. But if you look at the wood chips or the bark that's fallen, and if they're on top of the leaves, that usually means it's pretty fresh. But if it's, you don't really see any bark on the ground, or maybe if it's like under like the new set of leaves that are fallen, then that kind of means like, okay, this might be a little old, but it's still good to know.
Do you put anything into like how many are in one area? Like at what point does a rub make you want to hunt an area, want to make you stop and actually get up in your saddle?
If it's on like a really good trail, I'll really take it into consideration. But I don't know. That's tough because there's different scenarios there, right? Because I think at least where we hunt, where I have seen the most rubs in a like one little 150 yard group would be like on an old logging road. And they lay it down like it's nobody's business there. But when you get more into the thick stuff, it's mainly like one here, 150 yards over here, 175 yards over here. And like, that's cool. But I'll probably have to have at least 3 rubs within a pretty good little short walking distance for me to be like, okay, I probably need to set up around here. And it has to have some sort of like pinch point or funnel where I'm like, okay, they're going to have to walk through here. They're not just, and I guess the reason I think that is that way they don't just get downwind of that and try to check something that way or from scent wise. I don't know. It just makes me feel better if it's the more condensed it is in an area in one of these little tighter travel corridors, the better.
I think about rubs. I don't think typically a rub is something that makes me want to stop and get in a tree. It's usually a rub paired with a couple other things, like a rub
and I guess
and a scrape.
Kind of get
yeah. Like you said, a rub and a trail, a rub and a piece of topography. And the more of those things you can stack in one little area, the more I'm like, okay. Like if I get into a spot and there's a scrape and a trail and a piece of topography, and then there's like 3 or 4 rubs in a 50-yard area, I'm like, oh yeah, right here. Like get in right here. And I like rubs because they're typically one of the easiest things to see in the woods. They're very easy to locate.
After the foliage is gone, yeah. Because like right now, or if you're looking, let's say your season opens like in September, there might be a little bit of, late September, there might be a few rubs laid out where they're trying to shed or something like that. But it's pretty hard to see up until like the grass starts going dormant and the leaves starting to fall.
Which we're right there. We're right on the cusp of it.
We are here. Hey, aren't we all? But what do you think about hunting those old logging roads? Because that's something new that I've been kind of interested in, because that's where we see, most of the sign. So that's kind of something that deters me, because any other little, I guess, situation, if all those rubs and scrapes and everything that were made on those old logging roads were in a different scenario, like a trail or a bench or something like that, you'd be like, no brainer, I need to sit here.
Yeah.
But just because it's a logging road and it's an easier access for humans or whatever it is, it deters me away. Do you think that's the wrong way to go about it, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we talked to I think it was Johnny Eberhard in February, and we were talking about rubs and scrapes and stuff on access routes. And if those stuff was in or super close to the security cover that wasn't an access route, I would definitely hunt it. But I don't feel super comfortable hunting an access route, and a lot of that is just because of the pressure of other hunters.
But it is close to the security cover because, and more than I do, and especially in those more mountainous areas, it seems like they can bed anywhere. But in that particular situation, there was a overgrown clear cut that it was basically made by. You know what I mean? Because obviously there's a logging road right there, so there's a clear cut and it's overgrown now, so that's security cover.
I think you should try it.
I don't. What needs to happen is just a camera needs to try it, but we haven't got that far yet, and we haven't, because usually we'd hang them there early summer, and then as soon as the pressure started, we got our first person on camera. We were like, all right, pick it up. Let's not get this camera stolen. We already know what's in the area. Let's do boots on the ground now and just try to make moves, as we hunt during the season.
Yeah, it's not a spot that I would hunt. I would say that. Yeah. And I think if you had utter confidence in it, you already would have hunted it. That's how I look.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's just that road. And remember that road where I found that deadhead though?
I got shot. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an old little road right through there. And this weekend, I'm going to go hang a camera back where I got that GoPro footage of that like rub after I'm holding your deadhead and stuff. I'm going to set a camera right there because that's a pretty good trail. And it's like, it's on the edge of this like little cliff, and there's all that security cover right there. So that's like a no-brainer. They would walk there. Because other than that, it's just a sea of oaks.
I think it's context too, because those two roads that you're describing are very different. If I saw a rub on the top one, that's very walkable. The other one that you're talking about is remnants of a road. There's still 6-foot tall grass in the road, So, I think those two are very different. But yeah, I wouldn't say no, but it's just not something I would hunt because there's other spots that are better, I feel like. So let's talk about
not sign-wise though.
No, not sign-wise. Not sign-wise.
But that's the pool. You know what I mean? Like that's what's tough.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's so situational. So let's talk about the size of the rub. So we alluded to that in the beginning of the podcast. We were talking about, small diameter trees all the way up to big ones. Does big rubs equal big deer all the time? What's your opinion on that?
I know there's some stories that we've heard in the past of like this one time anecdotal experience of this guy seeing a spike rub this ginormous tree or something like that. But for the most part, I do believe that big rubs equal big bucks. And
think so?
I think that's, yeah. I mean, you might have those scenarios where you have those little spindles of little very premature trees growing up, and then they're all shredded. But if they're all clumped up, I found that it seems like the bigger bucks hit those more than like the little bitty basket racks do. It's either like big diameter trees that the big bucks hit, or like a lot of the smaller, really premature, like little saplings. Yeah. The saplings, they get hit if they're like super bundled up. I think that's bigger bucks as well.
Bow hunting is a game of confidence, and the last thing that you want to be thinking about when you're at full draw on a giant buck this fall is, I hope this broadhead does its job. I prefer a reliable, fixed blade broadhead that's tough, flies great, and penetrates deeply no matter the arrow setup. And that's why us guys at the Hunter's Advantage shoot Vantage Point archery broadheads. And just a few weeks ago in September, I laid down my first bull elk with the VPA Omegas. In my mind, there's no reason to risk messing with a broadhead that can have a mechanical failure when you can get a super tough, reliable broadhead that's sharp and flies great, and you don't have to worry about the thing failing on you. And if you needed any other reason to choose VPA, they're 100% made in America. To check them out, go to vparchery.com and make sure to use code HA10 at checkout for 10% off your next pack of broadheads. Once again, that's vparchery.com, and make sure you use code HA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast. I don't know, because saplings, I would say in the mountains where we hunt, the majority of the rubs are saplings. Right. Now, that's because a lot of the bedding cover in there, the majority of rubs that I find are on saplings. I'm talking like things that are around.
For sure.
But then you go somewhere like Southwest Oklahoma that's more mesquite and hackberry and those kind of trees, and they're hitting trees that are that big around, So it may be different in each environment. But I did, when we were writing out this script, I was thinking about a story like, does big rubs equal big deer? I think for the most part, yeah, probably. But not always. So I was thinking about Justin. He went to Kansas.
It's kind of like hoof prints, right? Like,
right.
Just because it's a big track doesn't mean it's a big buck. Usually that's what it means, but not always.
Not always.
There's studies that prove that's false.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about a little anecdotal story to talk about, and Justin was telling me he has a couple of smaller bucks that he shot in Kansas during rifle season, probably 10, 15 years ago. And he said, man, there was this one that snuck up on me, and he was rubbing a tree that was 18 inches in diameter, and I saw the body, and those Midwestern deer, they're bigger deer. I think they're different subspecies. They're just bigger. And he said, I didn't see his head, but I saw that tree, the limbs on it just shaking. And he said, I decided that if he's big enough to rub that tree, he's big enough to get shot. And he said, I knew he had antlers, so he shot him. He walked up to him, and he was a literal basket rack. Like a basket rack this big. And so I say that to say, like, confirm what you're shooting, right? And Justin knew it was buck, so he shot it. But big rub does not always mean big buck. Not always. I would say for the most part, but not always. Do you see some people talking about the kind of the eye guard marks and being able to measure width and stuff on trees, like width of a buck. Do you think about that at all when you're looking at rubs?
I mean, so yeah, like if the main, I guess, the main carnage of the rub is right here, and then you see like little jab wounds, like a little ways up or a little ways down on the rub. I usually take that as a big buck, because that's just, it's probably his eye guards hitting right here, or maybe between the eye guards and the beam, making the main carnage. And then if you get those little marks, those little scratch marks up on the bark, a pretty good ways from the main carnage, it's like, yeah, it's probably like the tip of the tines or like something along those lines hitting it up there. I don't think it's like him just getting really high up there with his eye guards or something and accidentally poking that. I think that equals big buck.
The majority of the rubbing activity that I've seen and found in antlers on bucks that I've shot has been right by the bases. It's like they wrap the beam around and they're just like kind of raking up and down. So that buck I shot with my recurve last year, the reason I sat that spot was, one, it had a good creek and it had good red oaks in there, but there was 2 giant cedars tore up in there, like a good diameter cedar, and it was tore up, shredded to the gills. I mean, there was, like we said, the stuff hanging off of it fresh. And I was like, okay, it was October 28th. And I was like, okay, there's a big rub in here. There's good food. Like, this is a good spot. The buck that I shot, when I got up to him, it's like it was like a fingerprint. He had all that cedar in his bases because he had like kind of rough bases. Cool. And you could just see the cedar packed in each one of the little crevices. I mean, it was packed like from his head to his eye guards was just packed with cedar. And I was like, you little sucker, you are who did this. I know it's like It was like a fingerprint. I could see him.
Yeah.
This is the buck that's been making this rub in here. These rubs. It was really cool. So rubs are neat in that way.
What's your thoughts on like the marks on the tree? Like, do you hold that? Would you agree that that's bigger buck sign, or do you think a smaller buck could make that too? Where there's like other marks near the main carnage.
I think it's something I'll pay more attention to going forward, but it's not something I've seen a ton of because, like I said, the majority of what we hunt is rubs on smaller diameter trees and saplings, and a lot of that has to do with a lot of the bedding covers and the clear cuts. So a lot of the places they're spending the majority of their time, they don't have massive trees and you're not going to go rub on a pine that's 40 inches wide. So that's how I think.
I did see a very good elk rub there last weekend. And I thought it was a whitetail rub, but only one side of the tree, like it was a pretty good tree, was tore up. And I was like, oh my God, like this had have to be giant. And then I looked a little closer and I could see like hair still in it. And I was like, oh, that's sick. And I pulled one out and it looked like a horsehair. And I was like, what the heck? Why is this so long? And long story short, I learned out it was an elk after further research. But yeah.
Was the giveaway also it was 6 foot up in the tree?
It was probably like between my nipples and my belly button. Like it wasn't
been a whitetail.
at all. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I wonder the elk.
It was just the hair. It was the hair that gave it away. It was 100% an elk.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So when, as far as rubs go, when would you expect, apart from the initial rubs that you're going to see in the shedding of velvet, when would you expect to see the most like kind of ramp of rub activity?
It's only going to get better. It's just like deer hunting always is until after November's over. It's only going to get better, right? Because last week, seen 2 rubs maybe, but it was a lot of miles on the Lamborghinis before I even seen that. I think this week we're going to really start ramping up, especially because of the colder weather and stuff like that. Hopefully they're on their feet. Hopefully they're just, kind of like you said at the beginning, hopefully they're just feeling different. Something about it is going to switch where they're on their feet. Maybe they're going to tell all the other bucks to piss off, run some smaller ones away, do whatever they do. But I really think they're going to be laying down a little bit more sign.
I hope so. That's the hope, because I've seen kind of as you're kind of ramping up in the pre-rut, you see those bucks obviously getting a little more pissed off, and I've seen them take, especially like smaller bucks, take out their anger on a tree, like they're not getting any, or like there's and they're like, and they're rubbing like with a little bit of intention. But I would expect to see that too as we kind of progress through October, to see more and more rub signs. At what point do you look at a rub and you say, okay, it's this day of this month, I don't care about rubs anymore, I'm kind of off of that pattern? When do you think they're not worth it anymore?
It's not like scrapes. Like as soon as he gets towards the rut, like scrapes don't really hold a value, because it's like, oh, cool, that's sign, but he could be on a doe right now. And
yeah,
so I think right now, depending if it's like a rub line, I think you for sure need to probably hunt it.
At what point do you quit paying any weight to rubs?
If I find a really good like funnel or travel corridor, if I know there's a good travel corridor, I will hunt it over deer sign like rubs or anything. So basically topography over rubs if it is the rut.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think like you use the example of like rubs and scrapes on a logging road. I don't think you can take any one of them in isolation and be like, okay, this is where I'm hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be different probably in the mountains to somewhere else to the Midwest. So, but rubs are made by bucks. So if you're seeing rubs, you're somewhere in
antler doe.
Which if it walks by me is going to be a buck. Until I check.
It's an antlered deer, I guess. That's what it is.
A deer that identifies as having antlers. That's what
Something to say.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, that was short and to the point. You got anything else on rubs before we wrap this up?
Keep your eyes open. Keep the miles on them Lamborghinis. So that's buck sign.
Really quick. Scale of 1 to 10, how important are rubs? Your top 3 sign, how important are rubs in that?
I would probably... Probably 2.
Take 2?
Probably. I'd probably take a scrape over a rub.
Okay.
And
why is that? Just real quick.
Because a scrape can be used by more than one buck. That's the way I think about it. A rub's probably one buck, and obviously you can get multiple rubs in a row. But I'm saying a good community scrape could be used by several different bucks, and so I think it opens up the opportunity for bucks to be laying down scent and freshening stuff up. Whereas a rub's not going to get freshened up. They're not going to hit it and be like, I got to go hit that rub again. I'm kind of pissed. They're just going to go make another one.
Yeah, because the colder it gets and the closer we get to November, they're going to be thinking less about like their territory, or I guess that's a bad way of rephrasing it. Just like you said, they're going to be using something to check up on their does, and I doubt really the does check up much on or leave their scent near rubs, hardly at all.
I've never seen a doe piss
over
on
a scrape. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen a piss on a scrape. Yeah,
for sure. But no, I would agree. I think two's right there. Scrape over rub for sure. But they're always fun to look at. They're easiest to see, that's for sure.
Yep. So as you go through October, be looking out. They're going to be probably more and more of them. Take that. That's region specific. I don't know anything about the Northeast, so just for we hunt. But that's kind of what these basics of hunting videos are going to look like. Maybe some will go a little bit longer, maybe some a little shorter, but I think this is right there in that sweet spot of what we're looking to get out of this version of the podcast. And if there's topics that you guys want to see that we didn't list or think about, feel free to shoot us a message on Instagram or Facebook, and we'll consider them, because we're going to be doing, like we said, a couple of these a month and trying to drop them at a timely manner.
And also make sure to check out our partners like Olympus Shield Hunt, Vantage Point Archery, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Long story short, guys, they help us do this podcast, right? And just to keep it real, we wouldn't be partnered with them if we didn't like their product or believe in what they're doing, right? And so the more you support them, it helps them support us, and also for them to make awesome gear, which they deserve, because we have kind of like this little saying: if we couldn't go to deer camp, sit around a campfire, and BS with these guys, we don't want to work with them. And that's just period. Okay. We don't want to be around. Yeah. Just period. We don't want to be around people that are just basically buttholes. And with that, we wouldn't want you guys to buy from people who's buttholes. So, help them, help us, go support them. And, help them, help us, help you, or however you want to word that. Go check them out. How about that?
Yep. Well, we appreciate you guys listening in. Make sure to leave us a rating and review. Subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. We're going to be putting these out on video and audio. But that is the nuts and bolts of the basics of hunting. And we'll catch you guys back in at a later date.
Jesus loves you.
Bye.